So contrast what we just saw there in Georgia from Vice President Kamala Harris and her supporters with Tyler Perry talking about America being a great quilt like his grandmother used to make, with Donald Trump and his rally last night in Tempe, Arizona. Here's what he said.
When Kamala came in, she deliberately dismantled our border and threw open the gates. She threw them open. The gates to an invasion of criminal migrants from prisons and jails, from insane asylums and mental institutions, from all over the world, from Venezuela to the Congo in Africa. A lot of people coming out of the Congo, not just South America. They're coming from 181 countries as of yesterday. Right, and we're a dumping ground. We're like a garbage can for the world. That's what's happened. That's what's happened to her. We're like a garbage can. You know, it's the first time I've ever said that. And every time I come up and talk about what they've done to our country, I get angrier and angrier. First time I've ever said garbage can, but you know what? It's a very accurate description.
So there it is, John Meacham. We were talking about that comment at the top of the show, calling America, quote, a garbage can with 11 days to go until the election. Just the contrast you see as someone who's written many beautiful words and told a lot of stories over the course of your life. What do you see when you watch the Harris rally contrasted with the Trump rally?
Well, the conventional politics from Jefferson forward, honestly, has been that the politics of optimism, the politics of hope, have tended to prevail, at least rhetorically, because democracies are human undertakings, and they're shaped by the tension between hope, which is about looking forward, and fear, which is about the anxiety created. It's an ancient definition. It's the anxiety created by the anticipation of the loss of something you love. The anticipation and anxiety of about the loss of something you love. And so the politics of fear is really powerful. But what has prevailed until now has been ultimately a politics of hope. Jefferson talking about we're the world's best hope. Lincoln saying we're the last best hope. Ronald Reagan saying we're the last best hope of man on earth. You can track the phrase. And we face a very clear choice. There is no mystery about what we're going to decide as right now and what's going to be rendered in 10 days. And it's that Vice President Harris would conduct a recognizable, coherent presidency, and Donald Trump risks taking us so far down an authoritarian road that we would become unrecognizable. And maybe people feel that a kind of a center-left presidency is just so much worse than this risk of the man who thinks we're a garbage can taking power again. But I don't quite see it. And I speak as someone who, President Biden is my friend. I've helped him when I could. But I've voted for a lot of Republicans. Mm-hmm. And I'd love to be in a place where I could vote for a Republican again. But this, to use a very technical term, Willie, this ain't it. No. This ain't it.
Yeah, not even close. Donald Trump saying that we're a garbage can, saying that we're a stupid nation. That's, who's saying that? What leaders around the world are saying that? None. They may not like us, but they like us because we're too powerful. They like us because our economy's too strong. They like us because our military is too strong. They like us because our cultural reach is too strong. They like us because our hard power is too overwhelming. They like us. They don't like us because our soft power too overwhelming. Our cultural power. You can go down the list. Donald Trump alone is saying we're a garbage can, and I guess he's teaching his followers to say that, or saying that we're a stupid nation. Go to Silicon Valley. Not real dumb. Not real dumb. Richard, what's so fascinating? There are two threads that are coming together over the past 2 years, post-Dobbs. We've heard a lot of people talking about how women have had their rights taken away, a right that they had for 50 years, that right to make decisions over their own body, whether they were black or white, Christian, Muslim, Jewish, whether they were considered themselves personally pro-life or pro-choice, whatever they still, at the end of the day, if they had a complicated pregnancy, which
a reproductive
we've
emergency.
been talking about, a reproductive emergency, they could make that choice to save their lives. They can't do that anymore. So you have that freedom that has been taken away. Now, what Donald Trump promises at the end of this campaign is to take away other basic freedoms. The freedom of speech. You look at Nancy Pelosi, who's been critical of Donald Trump. So now he's saying she's an enemy of the state and suggests that he can use the military, the National Guard, to attack people who engage in political speech he does not like. At the same time, he is saying,
His generals, too.
He is saying that he's going to go after CBS News. He said he was going to go after Comcast. With CBS, he said that his people have said they're coming after our show specifically. Why? With CBS, because he didn't like how they edited Kamala Harris's 60 Minutes interview. So now we've got women's rights, reproductive freedoms to make decisions over what's best for them. We have political speech with Nancy Pelosi and Democrats called enemies of the state because he doesn't like what they say about him. And we have First Amendment rights, really sacrosanct in this country, the right for the media to be critical of politicians, to ask questions of politicians. And he is promising, these are his words, not mine, not yours, not the New York Times, not MSNBC's, not CBS's, not Nancy Pelosi's. These are his words. He's promising that just like he took away women's 50-year right to reproductive freedom, he's going to take away the right to criticize him, and he's going to take away the right of news programs to speak honestly about him.
A couple of thoughts, Joe. We've come a long way since Ronald Reagan's City on a Hill, the shining city on a hill to America as a garbage can. I'd worked for Reagan. You were in Congress then.
Yeah.
The idea that you would have a Republican candidate so denigrate the United States it's to me almost unimaginable. Never thought we'd reach that point. The women's issue, one interesting question is whether there's going to be a closeted or secret women's vote in favor of Kamala Harris. Last 2016, pollsters didn't pick up certain things that were maybe pro-Trump. My hunch is, I can't prove it, my hunch is a lot of women aren't going to tell, particularly from conservative areas, that they're voting for Kamala Harris.
Let me help you really quickly and then continue. In 2020, a lot of pro-Trump votes weren't picked up. In 2022, a lot of pro-Democratic votes weren't picked up. Going in, and we're seeing it again here, it's hilarious, because you know it's not true. You know the number's a lot higher. People are telling pollsters that abortion, only 6% of people are saying that abortion's their top issue. That's what they said in 2022. Exit polls showed it up in the mid-30s. Post-Dobbs, reproductive rights are undefeated. They're undefeated not only in liberal states, they're undefeated in states like Kansas, in Kentucky, and in Wisconsin. And it's not even close.
That's one of the most interesting things about this election. I've had several meetings with pretty well-known pollsters this week, and everyone's saying the race is too close to call. The other possibility is the race is too opaque to call. We don't necessarily know what is going on, that the pollsters may not be picking up some important trends, some important developments. So we're all assuming we're not going to know the result till late the next day or maybe for days or weeks. Maybe, but maybe not. Right. I actually think there's more unknowns. And one last thought, you were talking about the enemy within, the criticism of the press and so forth. What's so interesting about this election is normally American presidential elections, and I defer to John here, but to use a football analogy on this day of the World Series, they take place within the 40-yard lines. The differences between the candidates tends to be far less than the similarities. This is an exception. This is an exception in American political history, where actually we've got one of the two candidates is pretty much in an end zone. Kamala Harris represents, if you will, a degree, I think, of what's worked for this country over 75 years. And Donald Trump,
Madisonian democracy.
yeah, and basically the Jeffersonian belief that and you need informed citizenry, and a free press
Correct.
is central to an informed citizenry, which was Jefferson's basic insight into American democracy. And we have for the first time, we have a very different strain representing one of the two major political parties.
And Jonathan, really quickly, I've got to follow up on what Richard said, because I'm always telling people how brilliant Richard is, aren't I? Especially about the Giants.
We're so
But
respectful.
He just really cut through the fog of polling. It's not too close to call. It's too opaque to call. Right now, it's looking like black men and Hispanic men and working class men may not be going to Harris as much as they have in past elections. How do you weight that? Right now, it looks like white voters with college educations are breaking in historic numbers toward Kamala Harris. I saw a poll yesterday, just a poll, but also showing that white Americans without college degrees are actually about -6, -7, -8, breaking away from Donald Trump. It's still in the mid to high 20s. It's still a lot. But again, so we have right now, we've got so many different groups shifting in so many different directions that, as Richard said, this race is not too close to call. These shifts are too opaque to see for a basic poll that calls maybe 500 people.
Yeah, a senior Democrat yesterday told me the phrase this person used was, "We're flying blind," because pollsters have gotten it so wrong in recent years, as you just noted, undercounting the Trump support in 16 and 20, undercounting the Democratic support in 2022, that each pollster is weighing things differently. And there's a sense here that some of them may be overweighted, oversampled.
And by the way, it wasn't just the 2022 midterms where everybody on the Republican side was laughing and mocking of Joe Biden for talking about abortion and democracy, and the red wave was coming. Look at the Kansas referendum. Yep. We were reporting here, every poll showed it was like a 50-50 split, where you actually had the pro-life side winning like 51-49. It ended up the pro-choice side winning 60-40. Like, that's how opaque it is right now.
And coming out of the 22 midterms, the exit polls were talked about how important abortion and democracy were. What's Kamala Harris closing on right now? Abortion and democracy.
That's
She's
right.
reviving those issues here for her finish. Now, this will also be, look, Trump's name's on the ballot again. It wasn't in 2022.
Right.
So pollsters are taking that into account as well. But by their own admission, there's been some pretty honest confessions about this. Pollsters aren't sure. And neither are the campaigns. Votes have started to come in. We'll know then.
Yeah, and by the way, people trying to figure out who's ahead in the early voting in Nevada right now. John Ralston says right now it's looking pretty good for Republicans, but then again, Republicans are voting earlier right now. So he said, I can't really tell because they may be, like you said yesterday, cannibalizing their day of voting. If these are new Republicans, it's great news for Donald Trump. But again, because they're shifting to early voting, people should be very careful even looking at the early voting, because we were flying blind there as well, because Republicans, instead of Donald Trump saying don't vote early, don't mail in your vote, it's rigged, they've been really pushing hard. And it's really the same thing with Pennsylvania. Democrats have a big advantage right now in terms of voting. I think it's around 60-40. But you don't know. You don't know where it ends up. We're all flying blind.